Time for some more experimental typography. So for this video, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to create a typographic layout on my computer, and then I'm going to take my camera and take a picture of my computer screen and see if we can get some interesting effects. Now, both fortunately and unfortunately, screens nowadays are pretty good. They are pretty high quality, so you really don't get a whole lot of artifacts or interesting textures or anything, really intriguing whenever you're taking a picture of a computer screen. So my plan is to take a picture of the typography, upload it back onto my computer, and then take another picture of that picture, and then just repeat that process a bunch of times to see if we can get some interesting artifacts or something. Now, it's totally possible that that still won't get us any interesting results, and if that's the case, I have some other ideas that we might want to try out. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so I got everything set up and I think I'm ready to go. I chose the words quantum and eclipse. I'm kind of thinking we're going to take this in a kind of futuristic or technological kind of direction. So that's two words that I thought would kind of fit that theme. Maybe that changes. Hopefully not, because I don't want to have to redo this, but I have those two options to choose from. So I've got my camera here. So we're just going to take pictures, put it on my computer, take a picture of that, and we'll just repeat. Get to it. All right, so I'm only 2 pictures in, and I'm already starting to see some distortion or some texturing. I'll throw the picture up here so you can see what I'm seeing, but I'm starting to see some of the individual pixels from the computer. We're getting a lot more chromatic aberration, which is pretty cool. And then we're also getting some discoloration from kind of where the light is shining from my window over here, which could be bad, could be good. We're just gonna go with it. I think it's interesting. So we're just gonna keep on. All right, so this is the 4th one. I'll put a picture up here so you can see it. Now you can really start to see a lot of the individual pixels, and we're starting to get a lot of like discoloration and stuff, which is honestly really cool. It looks really interesting. I'm honestly not sure how much longer the text will actually stand up to this. Like if we keep going, we might just end up like getting absolutely nothing, but I think it's at least interesting to see, I guess, how far we can take it and what happens whenever we go that far. I think part of what makes it a little bit hard is that since the screen does have brightness and that, the camera is like kind of focusing that in, you're kind of getting this like haloing effect around the letters, which looks nice, but I'm kind of concerned that eventually the letters are basically just going to disappear. But at least we have something that's cool and interesting to work with if, we go too far. But we're going to keep going, and we'll see what happens whenever we take this to as far as we can take it. All right, so I've repeated the process about 6 times, and this is where we're at. Honestly, anything past this point probably isn't going to be very usable. This probably is already too far, but even this is just really interesting to see how far you can push this effect. And I think if maybe I didn't have this window right here that kind of has like a glare on this side of the screen, that maybe we would be able to capture a little bit more of the word quantum. But, like I said earlier, just with the screen being bright and kind of creating that halo effect, I think you can only do so much. So I do think that I can use one of the ones that I've already taken a picture of. I just got to decide which one. But honestly, I didn't think that this was going to work as well as it did. So I did have another idea that I kind of wanted to try. So we might as well go ahead and try that. So let's do that and see what happens. All right, so for this second round that we're going to do, I just took the word eclipse. I just think that I like that better. But anyways, what I did is I just added some different blurs using the field blur effect. So I can kind of put the blurs where I want and the amount. So that way we can get just a little bit of blurring in different spots, and hopefully that'll just create some interesting textures or something, or coloring. Honestly, once again, I'm not really sure. I just think that it will come out cool. Hopefully it will, and then we'll have 2 cool things to play with, but if not, no worries. So let's just do it again and see what happens. All right, so I repeated the process with the blur variation about 5 times, and this is where we're at. Honestly, this didn't turn out as cool as I thought it was. Maybe if we were to use the liquify tool and kind of make the letters kind of bigger and then blur it, so maybe there's a little bit more to work with. But honestly, at this point, you can barely tell that I even blurred the text, so it really doesn't do a whole lot. One of the other things that I think I'm kind of figuring out is, you kind of have to overexpose the image, because if you try to underexpose it, I don't think you really get as many cool artifacts as you would as when you overexpose it. But maybe it's kind of like a mixture where you underexpose one, so that way you get some of the like individual pixels of the computer screen. The exposure is low enough you can actually see those, and then start kind of overexposing. So that way you get some of that bloom effect and some of the discoloration. That's just kind of what I'm thinking so far. You know, you could spend a lot of time if you were to do this yourself, you know, changing the camera settings, changing the settings on the computer until you kind of find something that's interesting. There's a lot of variables that you could play with. So if you do this, try it out. And if you come up with something else or some other ideas, let me know. I also want to mention that the only thing that I'm changing whenever I'm putting these into my computer is I'm removing the kind of distortion that's happening from the lens, just because it is a wide angle lens. So there's a little bit of distortion. So I'm just kind of flattening it out, nothing else other than that. But I think with the last batch that we did, there's a couple good options. So I think we'll go there and we'll make something using those. So let's get into Photoshop. All right, so first off, I decided that I wanted to use the word quantum and that I was going to use the fourth photo that I had taken. I felt like there was enough of an effect that it made the text look interesting, but it was still legible. So I thought that was kind of a good middle ground to use. But honestly, I didn't really have a good idea of what I wanted to do with this poster. So the first part of this poster design is really just me throwing things at the wall and trying to see if I can make something happen. I don't know a whole lot about quantum stuff, but I do know that it has to do with energy. And so I thought I would kind of go along with that theme and try to do something with energy or light, you know, something in that vein. So that's where I started. And I was just kind of playing around with that idea, just kind of bringing in different pictures and just seeing what works, seeing what happens, and seeing if there's something that I like. But honestly, it's just a lot of trial and error because I don't really have a solid idea in my mind. After playing around with a bunch of different photos and just trying out a bunch of different stuff, I managed to find this one photo where it looked like this person almost had like these wires kind of coming into them. And for some reason, I just thought that looked really interesting and I thought it looked cool with the way that the typography was. And so I just decided that this is what I was going to go with, and I was just going to start building the poster from here. But once I got the poster to at least a place that I kind of was okay with, what I wanted to do was try to kind of fill out the space a little bit because there was so much white and I felt like I needed some texture in some places just to kind of make it feel a little bit more grounded. It felt like everything was disjointed and I wanted to try to bring everything together. And so I was hoping I could do some kind of like overlay with a photo. So that way I could kind of bring everything together, add some texture in, and hopefully make it just feel a little bit better. But of course, this took a lot of trial and error, but I ended up using a picture of what looks like some kind of dashboard for some type of technological thing that I don't really know what it is. But anyways, I kind of liked the idea since it, you know, goes along with technology and energy. So I thought it was kind of on point, but I also like that it added in all these kind of like textures and lines and typography. And so it had that look and feel that I was going for, but it also wasn't too distracting. There wasn't too much going on. So I felt like it was just enough to where it added some texture and some details, but it wasn't too eye-catching or distracting. Now, one of the things that I really liked that happened with the typography that wasn't really happening with the picture is all these kind of like color distortions that it's getting from like the haloing effect. Like you can see in the M and the T, there's almost like this like yellowish greenish tint that's kind of going on, which is really cool. There's also the cyan that's in the A, but you don't really get to see a lot of that in the actual image that I'm using. And so I ended up doing was just kind of taking these paint brushes that I have in Photoshop, just kind of scattering them around, and then I just turned them into a smart object and blurred them, and then just overlaid it so that way I could get a little bit more color detail throughout the image rather than just the one blue color. So that way it feels a little bit more cohesive with the typography. Also adding in a little bit more of that realism, I suppose. And once again, I still felt like there was just too much white space and I just needed some texture somewhere. So what I really wanted to do was see if I could get that kind of pixelated texture that I've been using, if I can kind of make that kind of in the background, but not too distracting. So I was really trying to get that to sit just right. But once I got the textures to a place that I was pretty happy with, I still felt like there was a little bit too much empty space. And what I wanted to do was add just like a bunch of details that would kind of add to this piece, but not be too distracting. So what I ended up doing was taking these shipping labels that I made, which if you're interested in those, you can check out the link in the description. You can buy those. Honestly, I found so many ways to use these things, more than I intended them at the beginning, but it's really cool that I can just find all these different ways to use these shipping labels. So if you're interested in those, make sure you check out the link in the description. But anyways, I was just taking these labels in, removing the background so I just had the text, and then just kind of fading them so that way they're not quite as harsh and black, so they're a little bit more grayed out and they're not too distracting or eye-catching. Because what I really want is just some of that kind of like texture and detail, but without drawing attention away from the main part of the image. But after that, it was pretty much done. So here's the final result. Honestly, I really struggled with this one. I think I kind of did this in a really weird way, and I think there was a better way to do it. But more on that in a second. I feel like overall I hit my mark, which was to make something that is futuristic. So I feel like I nailed that aspect of it, and the design itself is pretty cool. Anyways, overall I think I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. It's definitely exactly what I was trying to make, but I do feel like maybe it's not my strongest design that I've ever made. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Did I nail this poster design? Is it not great? Let me know in the comments. Now let's get back to what I mentioned earlier about doing this poster out of order. So I feel like what I should have done, and I think what would have made this a little bit better and maybe more what I had in my mind, was to make the poster design first and then do the process of taking the photos, putting it on my computer, taking a screenshot, etc. Because I feel like what I really wanted to do was just have all of the kind of black text and that kind of stuff all kind of like meld together, as well as having that texture. And while I have the texture, it doesn't really feel cohesive because it's after the fact. I put all the text and textures and graphs and stuff after I did the text effect, so I feel like it just doesn't gel well together or as well as I would have hoped. So while the typography turned out in a really cool way that I'm happy with, I feel like what I should have done is just do the entire poster along with the typography at the same time, rather than trying to do the typography and then design the poster later. So what I would say is if you're going to try this yourself, I would just make the entire poster all at once, so that way you have everything set up the way that you want, and then do the process, so that way everything will kind of look similar and you'll get kind of everything bleeding together rather than it feeling like a bunch of separate elements. And as always, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.